Welcome. I'd like to call to order the business meeting of the Cave Creek Unified School District Governing Board. It's Monday, August 9th, 2021, and it's 6 p.m. Item 1.2, roll call. Members Brown, Walker, Fortney, and Hatcher are present. Member Busby is absent, but we have a quorum. Cabinet members present, Dr. Monroe, Ms. Rodriguez, Dr. Jensen, and Ms. Scott. Item 1.3, formal adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained. The motion carries. The agenda is adopted as presented. Item 1.4, we do have a couple of calls to the public, so I'll read an admonition in a couple minutes. Item 1.5, Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 1.6, President's Report. I attended the Kiwanis dunk tank thing, and a lot of our leaders were there. In fact, I think all of them might have been there, so that was really neat. And also the leader meeting that they had, I didn't attend it, but I came very, very briefly to so that they could introduce themselves. And the new teacher event that looked to be lots of fun outside. And so we're off to a new year, and hopefully it's going to be a good one and a smooth one. Board comments?
I just wanted to add that I did enjoy the Kiwanis event and got to meet a lot of people in the public, but I did really enjoy coming and getting to say hi to the new teachers, so thank you for that. I wasn't really expecting to speak, but it was still nice, so thanks for that.
I too was at the Kiwanis event. I know my kids loved dunking some principals in the dunk tank, so that was fun. It was fun to meet some new leaders as well. And then also, as a parent, was at back to school night last week, and that went really smooth as well.
This is going to sound like a broken record, but I also was at the Kiwanis CCUSD event. Well received. The kids had a great time throwing softballs at Mr. Petnato and Mr. Bagwell, for sure. Again, a great partner we have with Kiwanis. And then to follow that up that next Monday to the new teacher orientation was a nice event. I think it was well received. I know giving that support to our new teachers is very important, and I think they appreciate that. I also had the chance last week on Monday and Tuesday to attend a couple of the Meet the Teacher nights, Desert Sun, Horseshoe Trails, Sonoran Trails, and then Tuesday night at Lone Mountain. Many happy faces on campus, parents and students and teachers. Lots of excitement, and I'm sure that excitement had to carry over to the start of school on Wednesday. I would like to just thank the administration, the leadership team, our principals and staff for all their hard work here in the last few weeks to get all of our schools up and running and to make the start of the school year go great. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, board members. Item 1.7, Superintendent's Report, Dr. Monroe.
President Hatcher, members of the board, good evening. It's good to see you. I appreciate the board's support and visibility to our principals and our schools at some of these events. And sorry I didn't give you a heads up on some of the speaking, Member Fortney, but you guys pulled it off and you did great when you were put on the spot. But just a few things from me that I would like to share. As Member Brown indicated, we had a very successful opening of school on Wednesday. I'm not sure who was more excited, the kids or the parents, but Wednesday was a very successful day for us. Even our district office administration and cabinet, we made assignments to visit and be at each school during drop-off and pickup in the afternoon, not to get in the way, but just to be an extra set of hands. So I was able to be out at the gate at Sonoran Trails and sweating and greeting kids and telling them good morning, and that was at all of our schools. So Mrs. Rodriguez and Mrs. Scott and Dr. Jensen were also out there, and Even teachers have emailed me indicating how energized they are for this year, which is great communications to receive. Now, in saying that, a few nights before, our open houses were a hit. Like I said, very happy parents, very happy students, ready to come back to our A+ schools. Our PTOs just outdid themselves. If you look back at some of their welcome back for teachers and staffs, and some of the showering and the acknowledgments that they did was very touching, and you can see some of those pictures on some of the school Facebook pages. I want to let the board know that Partners in Education from the Holland Community Center, as part of the Desert Foothill Leadership Community, gifted our Sonoran Trails Middle School staff and our teachers with gift bags on August the 3rd, the day before school started. You should have seen the size of this bag and the weight of it, which was wonderful. It had supplies, markers. It's the little things that make us educators happy. Gift cards to local businesses and restaurants, which our teachers appreciated. The Partners in Education out of the Holland Center really wanted to shower our teachers and staff. We started at Sonoran Trails Middle School, and they're looking to replicate that same project around our district at each staff. And we're grateful for them and for their partnership, and we're grateful that they recognized our amazing teachers and staff. I'd like to thank Bob Moore and the Kiwanis Club of Carefree for supplying the district with 10 4x10 banners advertising the wonderful partnership that we enjoy with Kiwanis, how they take care of many of our needs and many of our students and our student programs. If the board members have driven around the schools, you'll notice the banners are hung up, or they're being hung up in prominent locations near Falcon Field. There's one along 60th Street near Transportation, and there's one outside even the district office parking lot. And so we really want to celebrate that partnership and make sure that the community is aware of that. They're a valued partner. And finally, as we're on day 4, we continue to watch our enrollment numbers. We're tracking students. Believe it or not, some students have not come to school yet. So we're trying to track whether they are absent or whether they're on vacation or where they are. We have added staff at Black Mountain Elementary School. We've added staff at Cactus Shadows High School due to their growth, according to the staffing model that we have in our policy, and we're watching the schools daily very closely. I'm also happy to report that more than 99% of our students returned to in-person education, which made us very happy. We only have approximately 45 students enrolled in our Cave Creek Academy of Excellence at this time. After the 10th day, board members will have a better and more refined idea of our enrollment once we get to that 10-day drop. But at this time, from the last day of school last year, our enrollment's down about 75 kids. But I'm very happy to say that we have recouped a tremendous amount of students that we lost last year when we were staring down 450, student loss. So very happy about that, and there'll be more enrollment updates to come. That's my report.
Thank you. Item 2, presentation of awards for schools and departments. There are none tonight. Item 3, public comments. We do have some public comments, so I'll read the admonition. According to ARS 38-431.01H, governing board members may not discuss or take legal action on matters raised during an open call to the public. The only allowable responses a governing board member may make are, number 1, board member may respond if there is direct criticism of the board member. Number 2, board member may direct staff to look into a matter. Or, number 3, board member can ask to have this item placed on a future agenda. Speakers need to be mindful of what they say when presenting to the board. Inappropriate comments could be considered slanderous. All right, and we have Ms. Jaylene Griffin. And Ms. Griffin, you'll have 3 minutes.
Make this fast tonight. So I saw on the agenda that you're going to talk about the political agenda. You're going to talk about the draft for 2022. I looked through the 2021 agenda. Saw some red flags in there I wasn't really particularly pleased with. So I'm curious to see, you're going to speak to that. Hopefully you'll speak to, you get to cherry pick 5. I went to the school board agenda. You get to pick 5 from last year and you get to add 2. And you'll have a meeting on September 11th, and you're going to send 1 delegate. I don't know who that's going to be. I'd like to know who that's going to be, the delegate that you're going to be sending. It'll be interesting to see if you will make it, how soon that draft will come out so we can all review what is going to be on that draft that you'll be presenting. You're going to be going against legislators. That's your whole goal on that, is you're going to be fighting some of the bills that have come out and so forth. So one of the things I didn't like in there is they want to put more funding in on piggyback on COVID-19 for more SEL. I already told you SEL is a slippery, slopey road for CRT. So we got to be careful how we use SEL. I want you also to research what SEL program you're in. CASEL, CASEL.org is what you guys are using. You need to research that company, and if you're using Harmony as your SEL program, Harmony, that's just a finger of CASEL. CASEL, you need to really dive in deep. I did a lot of research. You guys should really do your homework. Arizona Department of Education should be very careful. A lot of parents are very angry about the CASEL.org organization. It's based out of Chicago. It's not a good organization. We just signed off millions of dollars to use that program in Arizona, and I think we really need to pay attention to that. And I'm hoping that you'll do some really good things in the political agenda, and that you're going to go forward with some good suggestions and not dive into some of the, I won't go into it. I found some things I didn't like. I'll be interested to see what Beth has to say about it. And hopefully some parents will start getting involved and pay attention to what things are going on, not just in this school district, but all over Arizona, and according to the Arizona Department of Education, what they're bringing in to your school districts and what you bring in according to what they tell you to do. So do your homework, look at CASEL.org, dive in deep, look at what they're actually using as their backboard for SEL and CRT. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, and I will probably mispronounce his last name, Jennifer Signoni, or, sorry about that. Can you say it for us, please? Signoni. Okay, Signoni. Thank you, and you'll have 3 minutes also.
Okay. I've never come to one of these before. My daughter goes, or was going, to be going to Lone Mountain Elementary this year, and I just felt it necessary to come and say something, because I don't think enough of the parents are coming and speaking, because I really feel like Cave Creek Unified has pretty much ignored the whole COVID situation. At least that's what I'm getting from it. So I just kind of felt it necessary to come and just tell you my experience. When we went for our first day, I was quite mortified. I've spent my entire life in the medical profession. My daughter's godfather works for a CDC lab. He has a PhD in virology. So we hear a lot of firsthand what happens, how it's transmitted and so forth. You know, you were mentioning about all these happy children. My child's first day of school wasn't happy. It was at home crying because she couldn't go to school. Sorry. And I can't believe that nobody seems to take this seriously. It's like everybody seems to be waiting for the wolf to break down the door before we do anything. I mean, we went into our classroom. I know masks can't be mandated, but, you know, the teacher's mask is hanging around her ear. My daughter went through the gifted testing, was gifted in all 3 categories. Teacher didn't even know about it. 5 of the desks were face-to-face in pods. Nothing in between them, no separation of the children. I mean, they literally might as well be breathing on top of each other all day long. I mean, I don't understand why, as a school district that wants to do the best for children, that we're not doing something. The fact that these kids are literally sitting on top of each other, and every time I ask what they do, they talk about when they eat or in the cafeteria. But what about in the classrooms? I mean, what happens in the cafeteria is for 20 minutes a day. To me, it was unbelievable that there was no strategy from the schools as a whole on how it was going to be handled. There's no plexiglass, the desks are on top of each other, the people of authority don't seem to be setting any example. To me, it was honestly disgusting. You know, I think when you talk about that there's kids missing, you don't know why. Well, my kid is one of them, because I haven't officially pulled her out of school yet, because the thought of putting her back in that crummy Florida online, breaks my heart. You know, I run 2 of my own businesses, and I'm gonna stay home and try to figure out how to teach my child because there's literally no online school. Is that my 3 minutes? Anyhow, I urge the board to consider that there are other ways of doing things, and the 94,000 children have tested positive this week for COVID-19, and 4 times the amount of children have been hospitalized just this week. And even the American Academy of Pediatrics urged the FDA today to authorize vaccines. So please just consider there are other things we can do than just mask.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking, y'all. Item 4, presentations, information, reports. Item 4.1, 2021-2022 Superintendent District Goals and 3-Year Fiscal Action Plan presented by Dr. Court Monroe.
President Hatcher, members of the board, my presentation may not be as pretty as the cabinet and my colleagues, but hopefully it gets the point across and it's easy on the eyes. But the purpose of the next few minutes of this presentation is to present the superintendent's goals for the school year and review a 3-year fiscal action plan. So just review a list of some of the things that we'd like to undertake over the next few years. So first of all, spending a little time on the superintendent's goals, initiatives, whatever we'd like to call them. I have down here initiative, but the first one is to revitalize the Cave Creek Unified School District strategic plan. What that means is we need to figure out what are our priorities, what's our current reality, and what is our mission and vision. And I want the board to know that'll be done through the lens of the voices of our community stakeholders. There'll be a process to doing that where teachers, staff, nonprofits, church leaders, small business owners will be involved, and we'll bring updates to our board so that they can be a part of that and see what that looks like. Very excited about that project to allow us to align our arrows and our initiatives into really what we're doing. Initiative number 2 would be to educate our community stakeholders on school finance, to help our voters understand the intricate and complicated school finance. Along with that, to manage our resources effectively, to be able to have long-term systems of sustainability. And taxpayer dollars are very sacred to this board. That's made very clear to me, and it's also very important to me as the superintendent. And I want to make sure that we are stretching our dollars and being as responsible with that money as possible. Initiative number 3 would be to implement to develop and implement a new teacher and administrative evaluation system through our effectiveness project. So breaking that down, what that means is I believe and know that our students can receive a better whole student education when we as staff and teachers and leaders, as we get better ourselves. And I believe that a teacher and leader student evaluation system can increase our student outcomes and the wonderful things that our students are able to do. And then number 4, as the board has heard that one team phrase quite often, you will see very practical steps to continue to build relationships of trust among stakeholders, the community, departments, schools, teachers, staff, whether it's a business partner breakfast, whether it's barbecues that are happening, but there'll be an increased amount of visibility for me to get to know people and to build relationships of trust and to have shared values and common ground. I think that this is an opportunity this year, and so I'm very excited about that. So you'll hear that one team phrase quite a bit. It's kind of become our rallying cry this year to really help people understand that we're a unified district. We're not a high school district, we're not an elementary district, but we're unified. We're a pre-K to 12. Switching gears a little bit, the board has probably seen this. I've probably shown this graphic before, but this illustrates some of our surrounding school districts and their tax rates. And we sure are fortunate and blessed living up here in Cave Creek. If you can see on the far right, to see that our primary and secondary tax rates are very, very low, which makes us a very attractive place to live. However, with the tax rates being low, it can be harmful to education at times. And I want to point out in the bottom right that if you look, Cave Creek Unified is the only unified district without a current active bond or override. Looking along that bottom axis, I would just point out Paradise Valley has 3 initials, MC&B, which is a maintenance and operations override, a capital override, and a bond. Scottsdale has all three. And let's see, where's Paradise Valley? Oh, Paradise Valley, Scottsdale, and then Deer Valley has an M&O override and a bond. So I just bring up our neighbor comparisons because those are the neighbors that surround us and the other long-term funding that they have that we do not. As the board is aware, as part of our plan moving forward, the 3 years is an override will come up. It will be studied by an excellence committee, by a community of stakeholders. An override is a way for a school district to generate additional revenue with voter approval, with local control. The board's very well aware of the three types of overrides that exist. And a maintenance and operations override supports things such as teacher salaries, benefits, supplies, and general operations. School districts can go out for an override up to 15%. That's the limit. And overrides are good for about 7 years when they start scaling back. And a lot of times then voters will have to vote for a renewal of that override. Currently, 75% of all school districts in Maricopa County have some type of override. And as we saw in the last chart, we're the only unified district that's not working under an override or a bond. The board is aware of what a bond is because the board voted recently to put that on the ballot for November. With voter approval, public school districts may issue bonds, which are purchased by investors to fund projects that have useful life longer than 5 years. So there's a few examples that are there. Bonds are repaid over a set period of time, and a bond is a debt instrument that's secured by a political subdivision of Arizona. We had a bond, as the board is aware, in November 2014. Taxpayers approved the issuance of a $30 million bond for various things that are listed there. All those bond proceeds were spent by June 30th of 2020. Now, this image kind of has a hinge here. So between January and June of 2021, Mr. Leedy, who is now retired and replaced by Mrs. Rodriguez, we began to formulate a 3-year plan for sustainability financially and start to evaluate some programs for return on investment. I want the board to know, in looking out 3 years, really this action planning hinges on the successful passing of voter-approved bonds and overrides. So what I want to tell you is it's very fluid. And although we may have some clarity now, the picture becomes a little murkier in year 2 and year 3, pending if these type of things are, the board chooses to put those on the ballot and if they pass or fail. Without an override, as the board is aware, and if student enrollment decreases, we could see an increase in class sizes. Programs may have to be adjusted and reduced, and unfortunately, we might have to consider a reduction in force, which I know no one wants. So let me just highlight a few things that we're doing, and I won't read every single bullet point because everyone can read, but for this school year, we have a few goals in mind. We want to formulate our 3-year plan, which we're working on now and we're presenting to the board for financial sustainability. I'd like to build up our capital and evaluate programs for return on investment. Remember, we've dipped into our capital quite a bit over the years to pay for some of our maintenance and operation costs. And like you, board members, I was brought up by my parents to always save for a rainy day. And so it's important. I understand it may be raining now financially for a lot of different reasons, but I believe that we should try and set aside and save as much as we possibly can. I think that's a good finance 101. So number one, as the board is aware, we want to explore the space at Desert Arroyo Middle School. Mrs. Scott and I have another meeting with EVIT this Friday. I'm very excited that Mrs. Scott, 4 weeks in, brings quite a bit of knowledge for the programs that we can add to EVIT. I understand that this was part of the bond in the past, and so I'm excited to accelerate that and get that going. In addition, DAMS is a large campus. Are there opportunities to lease space and opportunities for revenue? We'd like to explore that. Number two, we have a bond on the ballot. It's $40 million. I firmly believe that these are the type of things that make a community stronger because they keep home values up, as we have really good facilities and infrastructure and technology and safety and security. Pointing out that fourth bullet point, approximately $800,000 a year could come back into our M&O due to debt service being paid off. And we've worked really hard to meet the needs of the majority of the community and opening up our schools to in-person learning. So we'll see what happens. I'm kind of on a road show presenting a lot of facts to help people understand the bond with Mrs. Rodriguez. As the board is aware, we want to continue to drive enrollment increases to increase our marketing presence, increase our programming presence. That is slowly gearing up, but our presence on social media, on school tours, and publications that happen so that we can capture some of the kids that we lose with our capture rate. Mrs. Rodriguez and Mike Santina have been challenged this year to increase our building renewal grants, to have more of our projects approved by the SFB. Now, when we do that, what's great about that is not money that it comes from our local taxpayers, so we can protect our tax basis as we increase those grants. And so I've really challenged them to step those up, because a lot of our repairs and capital things, they may be able to qualify for that. As I mentioned earlier, we partner with great organizations such as Kiwanis. We're interested in continuing our partnerships, strengthening those, increasing the amount of gifts and donations. And I know one thing that Member Walker has talked about is the tax credit drive. We need to step up our game with our campaign for tax credits. We certainly bring in a lot of tax credits, but the sky is the limit. We need to help educate our people. It's oftentimes I call it the best kept secret in Arizona that people just aren't aware of, the tax credit campaign. Educational Community Services provides an opportunity for us. They obviously bring in revenue for the district, but one angle we'd like to focus on is bringing in non-district students to be part of our programs. Let's say a student enrolls in a program. They feel of the love and the caring concern from the staff. Maybe they would choose to enroll their kids in one of our schools. And then can we meet the needs of the community by programming what people will sign up for? Number 8, I want to just explain clearly. I'm not saying we're closing a school or consolidating. What I want the board to know is we want to start to explore if it's financially expedient. Do we need to collapse a school site? That's never a popular thing. Do we need to combine programming? Those are issues that we need to tackle if our enrollment continues to decline, or if finances present themselves that way. I think it's important to us that we have a contingent plan that involves the public, that involves a committee process, that we look at all those things very, very carefully. ESSER 3 monies or one-time monies, we'll present to you that in just a few minutes. We need to use those very judiciously for one-time expenses. We can use them for this year and for the next 2 years. I want to just highlight that that's one-time money, so when you stare at it and say, wow, that's $4.4 million, it can really be spent very easily. And so we really want to identify our priorities. So although the board may see a list of considerations a little later tonight, we're still getting community input, we're still getting staff input before a lot of those decisions are made, but we're grateful for those ESSER 3 monies. And then, Marcy, Mrs. Rodriguez, do you want to touch on number 10? I want to just say I appreciate Mrs. Rodriguez, again, on the job for 4.5 weeks, hit the ground running when I challenged her to say, we need to, this tax statement that goes out to the public, we need to help people understand and be transparent of what this is. So do you want to kind of explain that really quickly?
Sure, yes. Thank you. President Hatcher, Dr. Monroe, members of the board. So one of the things that I was shown when I first started here by Mr. Leedy was this line on the tax bill that our property taxpayers receive. And it says, additional education aid, Cave Creek. But the school district does not receive that money. So we felt that was very misleading. The reason that money is collected from our taxpayers is because of the equalization formula that the state has put together. And it discusses it in state statute 15.992. And it explains because we have such a high assessed value that our taxpayers must pay an additional tax, which goes to the state general fund. So when I approached the people at the county schools office, I asked them if it was possible for us to change that language to be more appropriate. And so when they looked into it and they agreed that that does not accurately state what that tax really is, they've agreed to change it. So hopefully in September, when we get our tax bills here in the district, it will say additional education aid, revised statute 15.992, and our name will not be associated with it anymore.
And that's I see that as a significant victory. If I live in the Cave Creek Unified School District, I have nothing to do with the schools. I don't have any kids or grandkids, and I go out to the mailbox and I get my tax statement, in September. If I was to read additional education aid dash Cave Creek, I would think that it goes to the school district. So just the fact that we're able to change that wording, I think it is some transparency and truth to our taxpayers. And then our second big task moving ahead will be can we adjust the state equalization? So that's a taller mountain to climb, but so that we get that money. Right? Not only do we clarify the language that we're not getting the money, but is there some sort of lever because in this community, because of the price of our homes and such and the livelihoods people have, we're almost penalized in a way. So I appreciate Mrs. Rodriguez clarifying that. So 2 years out, what would be some of our action planning list? There would be a committee together, and we most likely would consider an override. That takes it's a long road up to get the community and our staff input on an override and why and what it would be for, and so it's a very careful, slow process. I certainly don't want it to be reckless, and I do want to just make it very clear that this is all sample language. This is just kind of a draft sample language for the board. So we would be able to ask for up to 15%. If that was the case. And here's just a few bullet points that are potential samples. Why would we go for an overwrite? To maintain and increase our programs. Notice it says maintain and increase. Our world language programs, our IB, AP, pre-AP, our junior ROTC. Our high school doesn't even have a junior ROTC. I fell off my chair when I heard that we didn't even have a boys volleyball program and a badminton and sand volleyball, and those are things that are given at a high school, especially in ROTC in a community like this that values our military service and those kind of things. However, that's not an end-all list. I just want to give the board kind of some examples. To maintain our class sizes or even to lower our class sizes in various areas. To increase our staff salaries, that would be driven by a salary study. This year we're going to invest in a third party to do a salary study. How do our teachers compare with those from other districts? How do our bus drivers compare? How do our aides compare? And then with that data, we can see how much it would cost to bring our staff up to market. Now, we can probably all guess where a lot of our jobs are because we do lose teachers to our surrounding districts, but a salary study would give us the data so we could make very smart decisions, not just a gut feeling or anything like that, and we could put our staff in the market. As the board's aware, our fees are very high. It's not anything that I'm proud of, but what an override could do is slash those fees drastically. A few of those fees are athletic, club, IB, parking, and AP. Innovative instructional and learning materials to prepare students for post-secondary success. Mrs. Scott and Dr. Jensen were talking to me earlier about, the last time any type of formal adoption was done on any type of materials in this district was a long time ago. For our teachers to be successful, we have to get good materials in their hands, that are vetted, that are approved, that can really meet the needs of the curriculum. It's hard for us to do that right now. And then the last bullet I just mentioned were special area classes at the elementary school. We want to be able to guarantee that we can pay for things like art, music, PE, world languages, coding, and other types of things. Currently, we have a few schools that their PTOs are so wonderful, they're helping to staff some of those classes, and we'd like to avoid that. Generally, PTOs don't pay for those kind of things, but if we were to pass an override, those would be opportunities that we could have. We're going to continue in 2 years out to look at our marketing program. You can see there's a few that are repeated, our ECS. If needed due to enrollment loss, explore collapsing a school site. There's ESSER 3 monies. Again, this is very fluid and could change if the bond does not pass this November, or even if an override does not pass, if the board chooses to put that on a ballot. I did add number 6 is our cabinet is only 4 weeks old. We're still an infant cabinet. I'd really like to have us tool to really advocate for change and use some of the groups that we work with, such as ABEC, EFRG, GuppyMac, to be able to lobby for changes that we think is best for this community and the kids and the teachers in this community. So from a position of strength, it's just going to take us a little time to really get our feet under us. Again, you see the tax credit, and you can see maximizing the little grant funding that we do get from state and private grants, as well as federal grants. When we look out 3 years, as I mentioned, it gets a little murky. It gets a little more cloudy. The magic 8 ball and the crystal ball gets a little cloudy, but really that third year, that fourth year out there would be contingent on the passage or failure of a bond and an override passage. And I'm happy to answer any questions or or we can discuss anything the board seeing in that presentation.
Questions?
Oh, sure.
Going back to your initiative one, when do you anticipate beginning that process? You had said that you were going to go out to the stakeholders and stuff. When do you anticipate?
President Hatcher, last week, Dr. Jensen, Mrs. Scott, and I met with an outside facilitator, an expert in that area who might come in. We're hoping in September. I'd love to bring something in a draft status to the board, say in November, to highlight to the board the process and all the voices that were involved for the board's approval. So I envision it starting formally in September with some committee meetings that, as President Brown has pointed out, it is kind of a really good representation of 30, 35 people from this community at all different levels, with the schools represented and our parents. And then I would hope to have something to the board by November, December for the board's input and for discussion to make sure that we're going in the direction that the board would have us go.
Thank you. Also on the evaluation, Initiative 3, have teachers been told that there will be a new evaluation? And if and when they have, when will that new instrument be implemented?
President Hatcher, teachers and staff have been told, and I even highlighted it in our welcome back video as a celebrated thing. From the superintendent's desk, our evaluation system will never be a gotcha. The primary purpose of an evaluation system is to help people improve. Similar to when the board gives me feedback, I want to improve my performance. And teachers and staff were invited to be part of that process. I see that beginning probably in September and October, and President Hatcher probably taking the whole year. I don't see that instrument happening this year. What I see is all people trained, and then the instrument would be rolled out the next year. So again, I really want to roll this out slowly so everybody feels like they have some input, and then it'll be something created by us. It won't just be some package deal that we buy. So I really value our leaders, our staff, and having input through that process. So it'll be a slow roll. So I think the new evaluation tool will be used in a year.
So by the time that's rolled out to the teachers, they will have seen what that instrument looks like ahead of time, won't they?
Absolutely.
They'll understand.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, they'll be at the table. They'll be at the table to talk about that. I've already spoken to the CCEA. I've already spoken to various staffs about the group, but they'll have a voice. It's not going to be pushed down to them. They'll be equal voices at the table, and so that's how something like this can be really embraced. And so it'll take some really in-depth conversations, and there's a lot of power in that process. It's not just buying something and saying this is the new shiny thing, but if we do it this way, there'll be a lot of ownership, and we can really identify in Cave Creek what makes a teacher effective. Like, what are we really looking for in our teachers and our staff? This year will be administrators and teachers. My idea would be the next year would be classified staff, a very slow, methodical role that's intentional, that people have input on.
So this year, they're still working on the existing instrument then, and we have a lot of new principals, and I know there's been talk about lots of 4s, maybe that's still the high number. So will the new principals start getting them used to the change that they may not be seeing all 4s or whatever it is next year, you know what I mean?
Great comments, and I'll actually tip off Dr. Jensen and Mrs. Scott so they can say a little bit towards that. But our current instrument is really good. It's everyone will be evaluated according to the current instrument. However, there may be a few flaws in it that it may overly inflate scores, or it may give someone mentally a ceiling saying, hey, I'm good enough. I don't need to improve. And we really want to have people that have the growth mindset. So we've started to message that just because a new evaluation system that you're going to be a part of may not have you as highly effective next year, it may have you as a high effective or effective, doesn't mean you're any less of a person, but or an employee or something. And so sometimes that's hard. When you've been evaluated as highly effective for 10 years and then suddenly there's a new instrument and you feel like, wait, is it because that person doesn't like me? Why is that? But I think we need to give our evaluators good tools so they can give good feedback to our teachers. Like you, I like to know from my evaluators, the board, what are things I can do better? And I want all our staff to have that. So did you guys want to comment, Dr. Jensen and Mrs. Scott, on that?
I'm not sure I could say it much better than what you just said, Dr. Monroe, but President Hatcher, the one thing I might add would just be that a lot of times our qualitative comments and the descriptive feedback that we give the teachers, we've been trying for the last couple of years to really highlight that as opposed to just the 4s, because at a certain point, even if you're a teacher who's been receiving 4s for the past 10 years, it starts to lose meaning. And so we've really been trying to highlight the descriptive feedback as a way instead.
Yeah, and kind of my last comment with that is we're really this may come out in our strategic plan, but we really want to strive to be a growth mindset district. Parents in this community, all of us, the most valuable possession and asset we have is our kids. And so we owe it to the community to continue to get better, to continue to hone in on our practice. So if I'm a teacher that's teaching the same way for the past 5 years, the world has changed a lot in 5 years. And we need our evaluators to say, hey, you're doing this great. You're knocking this out of the park. I see this. Here's a few things you can work on to get better. And it's not necessarily knock you down, but in that way we can get away from just a score, just like a 3 or a 4, but we can improve because I believe that increased performance by our staff leads to increased outcomes for our kids, and we have better students.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Item 4.2, AZ Merit 2, an Advanced Placement Score Spring 2021 presentation presented by Dr. Patty Jensen and Ms. Nancy Scott.
Good evening, President Hatcher, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Monroe, and community. We are here today to talk a little bit about our AZ Merit 2 scores that were taken in spring of 2021, and then we just recently received our advanced placement scores from the high school. So a little bit about the purpose of this. We want to reflect on that academic performance for the past year with our students and really look at take that learning and move forward, and that would be with creating continuous improvement plans through each of the school sites. And just as a reminder that assessment data really provides that student performance look and offers us that evidence about student learning. And it's amazing feedback for our teachers to be able to take back, look at the cohort that they're coming in with, and really having some of that baseline data as where those kids are at that point. What we want you to know about AZ Merit 2, it was originally supposed to be piloted in 2020, and then COVID hit and everyone went home, so it was not. So it was technically piloted this past year for the very first time with the Arizona standards, and it was a brand new test. And so we do not have any of that year-to-year data to look at to even see any of that student growth at this point. And again, we're actually going to have another change, as it will not be offered the spring of 2022. We're going to be moving to the AASA, which is the Arizona Academic Standards Assessment, which will be tested in grades 3 through 8. Our AZ Merit 2 this past year was tested in grades 3 through 8 and 10th grade. And we'll talk a little bit more later on as to what's coming forward with the new assessments. Again, some variables to kind of think about. We had the pandemic since March of 2020. We had Dr. Monroe transitioning in. This was one of our first time tests. One of the things within the school district that we looked at was that mobility and transition between our brick and mortar and online. So we had quite a few students that went back and forth with that. Also, we had over 140 new students from surrounding districts because they were shutting down and opening back up, and so they came over from those neighboring school districts and entered our school system, and then our reduction in force occurring at that point.
So anytime we look at data, we always can look at it from a couple different approaches or different mindsets. One of those, we could use it to justify our prior practices or just admire our success, which sometimes we like to do. We also use it to comply with federal and state requirements, which is definitely one thing that happens with AZM2s. But most importantly, and what we're going to do here is that we use it to learn and grow, taking into account all of those variables that we discussed, but we're also going to make sure that we use it to improve our teaching and learning so that our students improve. So just real briefly, we're going to go through these slides, and I want to kind of outline what these look like. So you see up at the top, it tells us the grade as well as the content area, and the ELA is English Language Arts. We have on the y-axis, it's the vertical one, we have our range from 0 to 100%. Board members note that there is one slide where we swapped it out because that was at 80%, and so it skewed the data a little bit, or it looked different, but I'll tell you that in a moment. On the bottom, you'll see each of the schools, BMES, meaning Black Mountain, and that was 76 students that we tested. The CCA is the Academy of Excellence, and only 10 students tested. It's important to note that we had about 400 students there at one point, but only 10 came in of the third graders who came in to take that test. And we had a good rate at the third grade, but that was only 10 students. Then we have Desert Sun Academy. Again, the number below it indicating the students, and you get all the way across. On the far right, the red indicates that's the Arizona state average, and that dashed line that comes across is just to help you extend that Arizona state average all the way across. Here's our third grade math scores. And then our fourth grade ELA scores, English Language Arts. Noting some very strong scores. This is the fourth grade math. This is that slide that we did adjust the y-axis on so that would look the same as all the other slides with the scaling. Fifth grade English Language Arts. Fifth grade math. And sixth grade English Language Arts. I'm going to pass it back to Ms. Scott.
And as we look at the secondary, we've got 7th grade ELA with Sonoran Trails, and then the CCAOE, again, is that our Academy of Excellence, our online program. 7th grade math scores, 20% above the state. If you look at our 8th grade ELA scores, again, 10% above the state there. 8th grade math. And then here on this slide, we've got our 10th grade ELA and math that took the AZ Merit 2. So Cactus Shadows 45%, and 32 was the state average, 49% in mathematics, and 26 for the state average there. As we move on to our AP scores, I have to tell you, I was just thrilled to see our AP scores. First of all, how many students on our campus take the AP test? We had over 420 students take that AP test. And then also the percentage of passing. So when you look at advanced placement, the goal is to receive a 3 to a 5 within that score, and that's that passing score where you receive that college credit based off of the university that you're looking at. And that's our goal across the board, is to increase the amount of students that we had. So if you look across here at our students, again, you look at microeconomics, 100% of the students that took that exam passed. It's consistently across the board, 75, 80% across the board on each of them. So on our next one, you'll also see, again, our AP research, our seminar for our capstone diploma, and then our Spanish language, 97% of our students for that biliteracy seal. And then our average for CCUSD at 65% passing, which is quite consistently higher across the board than the state average and even national averages in each of the areas. So some of those, some of the generalizations that we looked at, again, overall, Cave Creek scoring well above the state in every single area in ELA and math from 3rd grade on, and including within our AP scores. The scores have some inconsistencies between the schools and the grade levels, and we acknowledge that, and then we're looking at those multiple data points throughout the year, and as we work with the principals and the teachers to create their continuous improvement goals.
So here's just a few of our, I'm sorry, this is upcoming testing. Okay. I'll take it over here. So this is the, so this coming spring, we'll have a new test, which again may make it difficult with not having multiple data points of that standardized test from the state of Arizona. But it's a new test that will be administered in grades 3 through 8 in English, Language Arts, and Math. And in high school, they will be taking the ACT Aspire assessment. And you want to?
Yeah. And then, sorry, I'm going to take it a little bit about the ACT at grade 11. So within the district, usually every year we provide students the opportunity for SAT and ACT. Well, what's been nice with the state is that they're giving us the opportunity to use that ACT as also part of our state assessment. So our students not only see that how important it is, it's not just a state assessment, but they're also utilizing that for that post-secondary piece. So it's that win-win for our students, so that it's not just another test they're taking, it's looking forward for that post-secondary piece and the importance of that. And then on the academic standards assessment, we're still waiting for some more information coming from the state as to the blueprints and to what some of the sample test questions will look like. They haven't set those out yet, but as soon as they do, we'll incorporate those in.
Okay, so like we said, anytime we do look at test data, we want to learn and grow from it. So these are some of our next steps that we already have planned. At each of our sites, we'll have at least 2 goals that are related to student achievement. And this is a piece of baseline data. We're going to use multiple bits of data, but this is one piece of baseline data that we can use. We're also going to make sure, and Ms. Scott referred to it a little bit ago about some of the inconsistency between the schools and the grade levels. We're not satisfied until all of our students are achieving at a high level. And so we're going to use those half-day staff developments this year to really focusing on ensuring that across our grade levels, we're using some common assessment tools to make sure that our students are receiving comparable instruction and meeting those same high standards at all grade levels and at all schools. And then lastly, I just want to speak specifically to this third bullet point. Over the past few years, some district leaders, principals, and teachers have started some resource adoption processes. And then during those processes, we've redefined what a textbook adoption may look like. One of the pieces that we all agreed on in some of those meetings was that allowing textbooks to drive our instruction does not place students at the center of our work, and we want students to always be placed at the center of our work. These discussions involve teachers, principals, and district leaders, and we're committed to identifying resources that support student-centered instruction. We know that part of this process was interrupted in the spring of 2020 due to COVID, and therefore Stacy Weiss and I, our Director of Elementary Academic Programs, we're reforming that committee that was dedicated to identifying materials that support standards-based instruction. And we'll begin this process with math, as it is currently the biggest area of need right now, and it's the area that was actually interrupted by COVID. And so I know that sometimes that's a concern, and we do hear our teachers talking about those concerns, and we've been listening, and we've got items on the calendar to make sure we're going to get that addressed as quickly as possible. Some of our other next steps is that even though some of the math data is a little bit difficult to draw great generalizations from as compared to in years past, the teachers will still receive that data for individual students in order to help them grow and achieve. And then lastly, like I just alluded to, we're going to use that one team mindset where we're making sure that if there's one student at one school who's failing, we still have not done our job. And so we're going to make sure that we keep working on that to ensure consistency. With that, we'll take questions and discussion.
President Hatcher, members of the board, let me just quickly say before your questions, I appreciate a very thorough presentation. When they gave it to me, I appreciated all the data and the discussion. I often think in my simplistic mind that data is good for 2 things. It's good for a pat on the back at times, and sometimes it's good for a little kick in the rear end to get yourself going. But I do want the board to know that we do not see children as test scores. Obviously, our duty is to prepare kids for the lives they'll live after high school, but we understand that this doesn't make the student who they are, that an assessment is one point in time, but the whole child consists of just so much more. So when we talk about a one team, we also have kind of a one child mindset as well. And so I appreciate the presentation and how thorough that was, and we can answer any questions the board may have.
Questions?
I'll start. I guess a comment first and then a couple of questions. Obviously, in the past in Arizona, we've had the Ames test, the AZ Merit 2, and now we're going to the AASA. I have to enunciate. And obviously, I think we realize that the testing is just a snapshot in time. And it would be hard enough if we had the same test over a number of years, then you could maybe start looking at some trends. With that said, obviously, if the state doesn't change the test here in the next year or two and we go to something else, are you able to even go back to look at prior test results to try to formulate moving forward? I mean, I know it's a moving target, but we do have the data to at least look at. Is that even helpful, or are we trying to start from scratch with the new AASA test?
Yes, we can go back and use prior data to compare ourselves and to see how we're moving. And again, it looks different depending on how we do that. We can do it on an individual student basis, and then we can also do it on mass cohorts. And so we do use both of those methods, and hopefully we don't yet know the blueprint of the AASA, but hopefully it will also lend itself so that we can at least make some generalizations.
As in years prior, the Ames, the AZ Merit 2 has always been a big deal on campuses. You know, we've made sure we've taken, we're either before the spring break or after the spring break. We dedicate a whole week to make sure the students are in the right mind to do their best on the test. I'm assuming that's going to continue forward with the new AASA test.
Absolutely. We always want to set up a positive testing environment for the students. I will say it felt different this last year just because of the changes in the year, but we always want to set our students up for success and balance we don't want it to be a high pressure situation, but also we want you to take this seriously.
Do you have a date? Is it going to be like it was before? Is there a window and we just pick the week that works the best for us?
There is a window in April. They have it set out specifically for the writing component and then for the ELA and the mathematics component for that piece.
Okay.
At the high school level, it's essentially one set date.
Okay. On the, obviously you're going to look at the math curriculum or the math scores first. I guess this is a two-part question. With all the curriculum, obviously we want it to flow both up to grade 12, but also down to our PK to make sure we're starting our students off on the right foot. Without really knowing what the test is going to look like, is there also a plan to not only look at our curriculum moving forward, but then how does that correspond with us using the Beyond textbooks to make sure we're giving our teachers and staff the right tool to use for our kids?
Governing Board Member Brown, one of the things, as you looked at it, or when I was talking about it, it's the Arizona academic standards. So it's still the standards. The K-12 standards haven't changed. And so when they're looking at that, those stay the same. And within BT, it highlights those power standards and really helps us to focus. And that's where, again, as Dr. Jensen was saying earlier, we really need to focus on that standards-based for each of the students versus kind of following that textbook. I'm going to go 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. We want to really hit those important components based off of the standards. We know that if we hit our students at that proficiency and highly proficient levels on the standards, then they're going to be prepared for the AASA and for the ACT Aspire and ACT grade 11.
I know in the past the district's kind of been a little scattershot with curriculum, so I'm looking forward to see your efforts to make sure that, one, we are teaching to the state standards, and then if we're using the best curriculum, procedures, and programs that we can, because that's so important. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Just had a quick question. Just considering all the factors that went into what happened this year, I just wanted to get your thoughts about just how meaningful this data actually was. I know where I'm teaching, there's questions about how valid any of this is, considering everything that you guys pointed out in your presentation here. Can you speak to the validity of this test at all, and moving forward?
Yes, Vice President Fortney. You're right. There's a lot of variables that we need to consider, and for that reason, we're not like harping on anything. I mean, we do see a few numbers that cause us more concern, and we're going to dig deeper into those particular areas. That said, we're also making sure that we do have some common formative assessments, which in layman's terms would just be little mini assessments ongoing, like 3 to 5 questions, so that when we do get to April, there's no surprises. We already know. We don't need Arizona to tell us where our students are. We already know where they are. And so that's always our goal. And in this past year, there were definitely some surprises, and so those are hard to say whether that's, do we write that off because of something? We very well may, but at the end of the day, we're going to use it as a data point for our students. Does that answer it for the most part?
I've got questions too. When we look at the different schools, when you compare data, and I realize that this is probably not the best data, but will you look at, for example, if one site is teacher experience maybe, in addition to, maybe you have more ELL students at one site and so on and so forth.
Yes, President Hatcher, we did look at a few of them, and definitely teacher consistency was one. In the areas where we saw higher turnover, and I'm going to look specifically at, let's say, 3rd grade. That's a kindergarten through 3rd grade test. That's not just testing our 3rd graders, that's testing those children's experience all the way up through there. And in some of those areas where they were not as high, there were cohorts that may have had less qualified or less, I don't want to say qualified, more turnover amongst their teachers than in some of the other areas. So absolutely, recruiting and retaining the best teachers is our #1 way to increase our test scores.
And so if you discover that to be the case at one site over another site, for example, will teachers have an opportunity to do some horizontal alignment where those experienced teachers are sort of coaching or sharing resources or strategies? Because I've piggybacking on to what Member Brown said about the math, and I'll get into it more down the road here. I have heard from the teachers that they're using their own resources. So when they do that, there's no consistency. So you mentioned consistency with formula assessment, not formative assessment, but also consistency with materials. That was a long, sort of convoluted.
Yes. Okay. So we could talk all day about this. So if we look at those half-day, like what I was just referring to about our half-day staff development sessions, what we're going to be doing is all of the 3rd grade teachers across the district will be working with the 3rd grade teachers across the district and 1st grade and on up. In those, they're going to, one, look at the common formative assessments that they've already administered and said, hey, Member Walker, what did you do? You did a great job teaching, place value.
Yeah.
So what materials did you use? What did you do? So we're going to have some of those conversations and develop these professional learning communities where we're constantly asking and improving each other based on making it so that there's no question as to what happened that caused a child to learn. So we're going to have that high standard for everyone. It's going to be agreed upon, and it's based on the Arizona state standards. And then we have all of the experience within the room. So there might be a first-year teacher, but there also might be a 30-year veteran who's been teaching place value for, let's say, 10 years or 12 years, and they can use that from each other. And absolutely, we're going to shore up the materials, and we're working on that as well, because that is one piece of it. But we're also going to provide some teacher flexibility with the materials that they do use. Where there's not going to be the flexibility is in that standard and that assessment. That will be the fixed piece, and then the variable will be, how did you get there? Because you may have gotten the students to their standard in a different way than Dr. Monroe may have gotten the students to their standard. Does that answer the question?
That makes sense. Do we have any comparison to other districts? Have you seen the data from the other districts yet?
Still embargoed. We don't have that. We don't have that data, President Hatcher, at this time.
Because I'm curious to know how we compare with other districts who have been in school. Not so much who are out, but that would be, I'm curious about that too. And then for passing, it would be highly proficient. What about partially proficient? Is that considered okay. All right, so they're in those two categories then if they've passed. Remediation. Some of those scores I noticed were, especially in the high school, in the high school where they have to get out of high school. Will there be any remediation offered to them, or will they retake classes? What's going to happen with these kids that are failing and not proficient?
President Hatcher, we're going to actually talk a little bit about that within our ESSER presentation and the learning loss piece and some of the areas that will be able to cover that and help our students in that threshold.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think that does it for me. Anybody else before we move on?
I just want to say that I think this data is helpful. Probably we only have one junior high. So I think having 5 elementary schools all feed into 2 or 3 math teachers, I'm sure it's easy to see the inconsistencies there. So I appreciated that data. And then also, my son had like 4 or 5 math teachers, I think, last year. So I know it's a hard year for testing anyways. But I think streamlining that across all the elementary schools at least to try to get them at a minimum equalization there. It's important. So thank you.
Thank you. All righty, moving on to 4.3, ESSER 3 funding, presented by Ms. Marcy Rodriguez and Ms. Scott and Dr. Jensen.
Yes, good evening, Madam President, members of the board. We wanted to share a little bit about our ESSER 3 money, and ESSER stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. So let's talk a little bit about what ESSER is. So as part of the American Rescue Plan, there was additional funding. So this is the 3rd round of emergency funding for schools. So it is really geared towards focusing on that loss of learning. So it's mandated that we spend 20% of those monies that we've received on learning loss. So it also gives us some flexibility. So we're going to just talk a little bit about the ESSER 3 grant, telling you, first of all, what are some of the allowable uses. Now, I took these allowable uses from the federal guidelines that we were given, and I want to remind you that these are one-time funds, so we need to be very thoughtful about how we invest these monies. So here's just some of the ways that we can spend the money that's allowed, and primarily what it is coordinating to respond to the efforts of COVID. So the effects of COVID that had on the schools, and how can we mitigate that with this money. So you can just see a few of the things there: purchasing technology, providing interventions, summer learning loss, supplementals. It goes to the question that you had, President Hatcher, about remediation. And also said we can use this for mental health services. Purchasing cleaning supplies, which The first two ESSER grants that we received, the majority of that money was spent on keeping our kids healthy and safe at school. So it did fund a lot of the cleaning supplies, the masks that we provided. It did fund to help retain some of our employees. So you can just see these are the same as what those first two were. That learning loss one is really the different one. Communication with our parents and our families is so very important, and of course that contact tracing with the COVID still an ongoing issue with our community. So we want to talk a little bit about the stakeholder input. So what they're asking and requiring with this ESSER 3 is that we consult our stakeholders. So we have stakeholders of the students, the families, the administrators, teachers, principals, other educators, and school staff. So I'm going to turn over to Ms. Scott and just have her talk a little bit about how we're engaging with the stakeholders.
President Hatcher, members of the Governing Board, as you might have seen already, we have sent out a community and staff ESSER 3 survey that's going to be open for another week. We've communicated with CCEA and received some of their input to get that teacher input piece also. We will be going out and meeting with site councils to discuss and get input from our parents and our community members that way, and also our superintendent community council, and of course our superintendent student cadre, so that we're also getting that input straight from the students as to how to utilize those funds.
So what is the timeline and what are the what's allocation did the district receive? So the district received $4.4 million. Now, all of these ESSER grants started way back in March 13th when everything pretty much shut down in 2020. Obviously, those monies have been spent. That's a prior fiscal year, so we're moving forward this year. And we have until September of 2024 to spend all of that money. So again, being very thoughtful, it's one-time money, and how can we best invest the very limited amount of the 4.4? So I'll turn it over to Ms. Jensen for the learning loss.
Absolutely. So some of the considerations, now again, we're still waiting for all of the data to come in, but some of the things that we're considering, that 20% that we're reserving for learning loss, and that will go directly towards remediation for the students who fell behind during COVID or for whatever reason, but we're going to help them out. We also have the laptops. You all can read some of those as well. The elementary math materials, so that was what I was speaking to again. And then our teacher mentor program, which we are really working on kind of pumping new life into this year as well to make sure our new teachers feel supported so that, again, we can go back to recruiting and retaining the very best.
And then also there are still some of the expenses of making sure that we keep our campuses clean and safe and healthy for our staff and our students. We also looked at transportation, where you've got the kids confined to the area of the bus, making sure that we can identify contact tracing if there was an incident. And so we have the recommendations. Now again, let me just remind you all, this is going to be some of the items that we are getting community input on. So these are not just done, this is what we're going to spend it on. We want to hear from our community, and that's part of what we're going to look at with that survey. But here are some of the items that we are proposing. So again, cleaning supplies, wipes. Ms. Scott?
And then as we continue on, some of the key pieces with that K-12 curriculum materials are strategic planning, any of the gifted endorsements to provide our students that support from the K-6 level, and then the retention stipends.
So with that, we would entertain any questions you may have.
Questions?
And a quick question. That you mentioned the community survey. How long has that been open?
Sent it out last Thursday to
Okay,
everyone.
and How was that communicated to the community? Was anything sent out about that?
Absolutely. We sent it out on School Messenger to all of our families. We sent it out to all of our staff through School Messenger, and then we also have it posted on our website.
Do you have any idea how many responses we have so far?
We have about 840 responses.
Thank you.
Anybody else? On the math materials, do we have any idea of the cost of a math adoption, approximately?
I'm going to let you. I would like to defer this.
I can speak to that, President Hatcher, and I mentioned earlier when you see 4.4 million, your eyes get very wide. But when you talk about an adoption, a realistic K-12 adoption, or a high school adoption, or an elementary school adoption, you're getting close to $1 million for materials, and so adoptions can be very costly. However, that won't prevent us from finding supplemental materials that we adopt. And when we say the word adoption, is any curriculum materials are approved and vetted by the board. We just don't bring in any willy-nilly resource, because you never know what you would expose the kids to. But they can be pretty expensive. I think if someone was to guess, they might think, well, that to buy workbooks, that'd probably cost $50,000. Well, it might be $50,000 for one grade level at one school, and then you multiply that. So they can be really, really expensive, especially as Member Brown is talking about. If we want to really look at matriculation, not just second grade having it or seventh grade math, but really the students and the teachers getting used to it, you're getting very high. Is that pretty accurate there, Mrs. Rodriguez?
Yes, absolutely. We just did textbooks adoptions at my prior district, and they were $1 million.
Was that K-12 or?
That was just high school adoption.
Just high school.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I really have concerns surrounding the math based on what I've heard from teachers. I know we have beyond textbooks, and we were told last year that was not curriculum, but from what I hear from the teachers, they're under the impression that that is what they're supposed to be using. And what they've said is that pieces of it are okay. It sounds like they're having to run copies for anything that gets in the students' hands. I've asked some teachers, how do parents know what their kids are doing in math? They said, well, they don't unless the copy that was run by the teacher to hand out to the whole class gets in that kid's backpack and it goes home. So I have some concerns that I'm hearing that the teachers don't have adequate math resources from which to teach, and the kids don't have adequate resources from which to learn. The other thing I've heard is that they can no longer pull up lessons on the smart board. When I was there, we could pull up lessons through the smart board and teach the lesson that you also had the resources for right on the smart board, so it was large, the kids could see it, and they could interact with that smart board. And I'm hearing that they no longer have that resource and that ability. And then last I've heard, well, not last, next to last, I'm hearing that they're doing teacher-paid teacher, donors, whatever that's called, where they go out for the donors to supplement things. So anyway, I would like to see, just one voice I recognize, that when you all figure out what you're going to do with math, that teachers are consulted. I mean, they're the boots on the ground. They know what they need. They know what their kids need, and I would hope that they would have a lot of input. And then I've also heard for Spanish immersion, so I'm also thinking that if it's true for Spanish immersion, it's probably true for French, because I'm assuming math is taught in French the math is probably taught in French. So I've heard that they have English resources, and they're having to. Well, the Spanish teacher I spoke to said she's having to buy her own, look for it online, and so forth. So that's a concern if we expect the language teachers, and I'm not blaming you guys, I recognize it's a money issue. But as a board member, that is something that I hope that we can resolve. So those are some things that I've heard that I wanted to pass on to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, President Hatcher. So just to respond to a couple of those, absolutely, we want the teachers involved in the process. In fact, I believe the invite went out earlier for our first kind of, I'm going to call it revival of our math textbook adoption. And I don't want to call it a textbook adoption. We're going to call it a resource adoption because we don't want to get one boxed curriculum, because then we know what happens. We open it up to page 1 and then 2 and then 3, and that might be great if you're living in South Dakota, but we have the Arizona state standards, and so we want to make sure that we're teaching the Arizona state standards. And so we're definitely going to have the teacher voice. Now, I'm sure, as everybody knows, even within the subgroup of teachers, there's variance, and people don't always agree on the same things. And even within our little subcommittee that we're going to have for this resource adoption, there will probably be disagreement. And so not everybody is going to get exactly what they want all the time. I hate that they're going to teachers pay teachers and these types of things. We don't want them to be doing that. We do have methods to make sure that they do have quality materials. And so we'll continue to communicate that to them of ways that they can reach out for when they do need some of these materials. A workbook that they can flip through, they don't have right now. That is correct. And there's other pieces that they don't have. However, there's, in terms of the Smartboard stuff, I do know that there is a lot of the Smartboard resources, even through beyond textbooks, and other resources that we can use and that we can make available. So it's not going to be fixed by September. Probably won't be fixed by October. However, what we're really focusing on is putting the efforts in building the processes for collaboration so that they're not doing it alone, so that they're at least doing it as a part of a professional learning community, where then they're talking with someone else and they're saying, this was the great resource that helped me get those scores on my most recent place value assessment. And those are the types of resources that we're going to be looking for. And we want it to be simpler and easier for teachers to get to. And we'll continue to provide training and follow-up training for the people who need additional help with beyond textbooks.
Yeah, and Member Hatcher, thank you, Dr. Jensen, and Member Hatcher, President Hatcher, members of the board. I've heard the same things, and we have a lot of work to do. But this type of conversation is very exciting, and I just want to bring up a few points that the board has heard. You've heard a few things that would be involved in a potential override: recruiting and retaining teachers, materials. This is what happens when districts don't have an override, is you kind of get this little bit of curricular chaos where everybody's scrounging for the same materials. One thing I've noticed is there's a very, everyone has a different definition of what curriculum is. I will tell you, curriculum is not a textbook. When I went to school in Southern California, the teacher would stand up and we'd do chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It was very, that's just how it went. I would say the teacher probably used the book as our curriculum. However, we know curriculum is a lot more, and the textbook or the source becomes a material. And so we have a lot of work to do. I'm very excited about the conversation. I think we have the right people on the team to lead that out, and the teacher voice is just the most important, to have those people at the table. But we're going to have to, take one bite at a time out of that elephant. Can we prioritize some monies out of ESSER 3? To, what's the lowest hanging fruit right now? What's the highest priority? Is it elementary math for second and third grade, or second, third, and fourth? And so we'll look at that very carefully, because, when you have a lot of priorities, you don't prioritize anything. And so we got to really look carefully to leverage those monies. So I appreciate the very thorough presentation. Are there any more questions, President Hatcher, members of the board?
I do have two more. I just thought
Sure.
Sorry. Regarding math again, manipulatives. I ask them, because you know how at the end, when an adoption has gone its course and we have to turn in all the materials, the books and the manipulatives, we're told. So do the teachers, and I don't expect you to necessarily answer this right now, but I'm wondering if teachers have the manipulatives to use for the kids, the math manipulatives. And then some of them were also talking about science, and they were saying the FOSS kits are outdated, science standards have changed, as have social studies. I know third and fourth basically switched a couple years ago, and so they're concerned about the appropriate materials for those subjects too. So, not really a question, but.
Yes, so President Hatcher, so one thing we did not do when we ended the last adoption cycle, we did not collect any of the materials. And so the understanding was use them until you can no longer use them. So that is one thing that's there. My understanding is that every elementary school has a relatively robust math closet that is filled with some manipulatives as well. Obviously, that's something we'd need to take inventory and try to get under control as well. And then regarding science, that's another area that we want to look at as well. Ms. Scott and I were recently looking over some of the cycles, and we know that there are several that are out of date, and we do need to update them, but
Yeah.
we're also caught with the other piece that Dr. Monroe's addressing about the money as well as different.
Yeah, and President Hatcher, members of the board, if we get into a situation where our local voters support an override, the exciting thing is then you can budget materials for secondary and materials for elementary, a budget, and then you bring teachers and parents together to vet these resources and bring them to the board consistently for 4, 5, 6 years. So it becomes very exciting. So then you can identify we're going to focus on math this year and adopting at the middle school and K-6. And then the next year we'll pick it up at the high school. And so those are the kind of things that get me excited as the superintendent. It gives us tools where we can really sit down and vet these materials for the curriculum and then have a budget each year because of the override to buy the appropriate materials. When that happens, then PTOs can fund the right things. Then teachers don't have to go to the teachers pay teachers things all the time because we have, some money that we can use to buy 21st century really good materials that are support learning. So that's something that you would see if an override did pass, is a working committee of teachers and parents saying this is the secondary material committee, the elementary material committee that would work every year to identify those and bring those to the board.
Right, I agree with you, and it goes back to, once again, I sound like a broken record where it has to do with the funding formula, but I don't know if our legislature realizes that even though Cave Creek is a wealthy school district, how our kids are suffering, really, because of the tax formula. So, we're talking about that right now. So, anyway, thank you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. You can go first.
I just have one question. I don't expect an answer, but it was something that Member Hatcher said in regards to the smart boards in the classrooms. Have we had some kind of a technology breakdown that all of a sudden now the teachers can't use the boards, or is there a glitch in the system somewhere? And I would imagine that'd be for all studies, not just math, but I'm sure all the teachers love those smart boards.
No, Member Brown, it's simply, I think she was referring to a piece of the curriculum from the previous math curriculum that you could just plug in and it would appear with the lesson on the smart board. The smart boards that we have are still working. Not all schools, however, have smart boards, so that's something just to be mindful of. Not all classrooms.
I have a couple questions actually that came to mind as well. For professional growth for the teachers, for the gifted accreditation, do we have a cost on how much that would be per teacher and what that is? It a certain so many continuing ed hours or what that is? I don't know if you'll know the answer yet, but
Member Walker, we are actually meeting and talking about that. We're working with someone that their name was given to us to kind of look at that process. But when we looked at it, it's 90 professional development hours, in-service hours within a district that will help them to receive the credits that they need for that certification. And that's really what we're looking at this year, is to how do we provide that for our teachers, and so that they can get that gifted endorsement on their license.
okay. And then, thank you. And then around the mental health, is there I don't know if curriculum or what's the right word as far as what you could do to expand on that and offer that to kids?
Yes. So in the elementaries, we have the second step program at all of the elementary schools. And so that's something that we do have in common. And the expectation is that it's used in all of the elementary schools. We're also very excited that we were able to kind of rework some staffing so that all elementary schools do have a counselor now. It is part-time at one school due to smaller numbers, but all of our elementaries have a counselor that they're not sharing, which is huge. Just from the principal perspective, last year we were constantly calling our counselor who is, of course, on that day at a different campus. So that's a huge plus, and the mental health instruction in the classroom will be going through the counselors who will also be working and providing more training for the teachers.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Hey, since you guys are just doing so well with all these questions, I just wanted to go back to the part of the ESSER 3 that is that 20% that's dedicated to learning loss, that $882,000. Can you elaborate on what services, things are being put in for that specifically?
Absolutely, Vice President Fortney. So one of the things that is on our survey is looking at some of those tutoring options, whether it's before school, after school tutoring, and what fits for our families, but then also looking at some of our summer school options. And instead of just providing that online summer school, how can we provide that in-person summer school for our students and be able to really have that one-on-one time for the kids?
Anyone else? All righty, thank you. Item 5, action consent. Is there a motion to approve item 5, action consent, as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve item 5 as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item 5, action consent, is approved as presented. Item 6, old business, there is none. Item 7, new business. 7.1, approval of qualified evaluators, presented by Dr. Patty Jensen and Mrs. Nancy Scott.
To you so that all of the persons listed on here will be evaluating staff, and so our recommendation is that you approve our qualified evaluators for the 21-22 school year.
All righty. Questions at all? Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the,
No, you didn't.
oh, I'm sorry. Is there,
So moved.
okay, thank you.
Second.
Second? All righty. It's been moved and seconded now to approve the list of qualified evaluators. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item 7.1 is approved as presented. Item 7.2, ASBA Draft 2022 Political Agenda, presented by me, and so I'll give you the background as you see there. At their May 10th, that date needs to be updated, corrected for the record, 2021 it should be. Governing Board meeting, the CCUSD Governing Board by a vote of 4-1 reaffirmed their top 5 priorities and added 2 additional priorities to be considered for the ASBA's 2022 political agenda. ASBA's Legislative Committee reviewed and discussed every submitted proposal at their meeting on June 4th. Governing Board President Jeff Fortney will be attending ASBA's Delegate Assembly on September 11th. This item appears on tonight's agenda for the Governing Board to discuss, approve, and provide any instruction to Vice President Fortney as to the Board's position on the proposed agenda. The recommendation: the Governing Board approves the ASBA's draft 2022 political agenda and direct Vice President Fortney to represent the Board's determined position at the September 11th, 2021 Delegate Assembly. Is there a motion to approve that draft as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. So as we scroll through, that's been marked up. We can discuss this page by page if you'd like on the markups, or offer suggestions, comments. Okay, are there any comments on the page that we're seeing on the screen?
Well, I think that some of the things that we talked about in the May meeting are kind of reflected in here, not specifically, but definitely things that we want to address for our students because of the things that have gone on here, funding distance learning at 100%, making sure that voter-approved funding streams are intact. So those are things that I think we need to make sure that we are addressing. Since we are not getting that from the legislature, we have to make sure that we have a voice that's telling us that this is important, not just for Cave Creek, but for all school districts.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Rodriguez, if you could just continue to scroll slowly, and if anybody has a comment, jump in on any of the marked up language. All right, I think we're good. Go ahead. Thank you. There's more, isn't there? Mm-hmm. So we can see that last one showing on the page does not apply to our district, but not everything applies to every single district.
Right.
It's like Member Fortney said, it's for the entire state. Okay. Anything anyone want to comment on that page? All right, I think
I will definitely, again, mention that it seems to be very important in a lot of circles in all political aspects. You know, this is not a Democrat or a Republican thing or anything like that, but it is something that has been said that people want to have the school boards having local control, and sometimes that kind of seems like it comes and goes. So I think that the fact that it's in here and we're talking about it specifically is important, and I think it should be, we definitely need to prioritize that so that everybody knows exactly where responsibility lies.
okay. Of course, we don't know what this is going to look like. You know, this is general language. There's nothing specific in here. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, yep. A lot of COVID has been deleted. And that probably just came up recently with the governor's mandate, so I'm assuming that's where that came from. And then that's just language that we already have, that number, the second language on our 7.2, so that's good. We can keep scrolling. That list there, that's not really anything that the delegate will be. It's their philosophy. Okay, good, thank you. All right, any comments or questions or directions for Member Fortney?
Well, I just want to make a comment, or more of a statement, I guess. Last week in a press conference, Education Secretary Cardona, and I'm going to paraphrase, he said, do not let politics get in the way of schools. And I thought it was an interesting comment as he went on to discuss some other items, some of the things on his wish list for the beginning of the school year. But that phrase kind of stuck in the back of my head. As I was reading through the information, in my opinion, some of this platform from ASBA does not reflect what our stakeholders have shown in prior elections. And to give an example, the Proposition 208 vote in our school district boundaries, that failed almost by a 2-to-1 margin. So I think the governing board, we need to represent all of our stakeholders. And now these are also the same voters who the district is now asking for approval for a bond in November, and then a possible maintenance and override or an override next year, possibly. We have to remember that there are many more voters within our district boundary that do not have children attending CCUSD schools, but they will have that option to vote. We need to have their support for these upcoming election questions that the district's putting on the ballot. So I just want to make my statement that, remember, school boards are elected as nonpartisan. And as Secretary Cardona said, we should not let politics get in the way of schools. Unfortunately, as I did at the May 10th meeting, I will be voting no for this non-conservative agenda item. And that's the end of my statement.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, thank you for your comments, Member Brown. No other comments? Okay. All right, hearing, Member Walker, yeah, no?
Nope,
All right.
I think Jeff's a perfect represent us as much as he's been involved with a lot of these legislation issues and education, so I'm good.
All right, all right. It's been moved and seconded to approve the ASBA draft 2022 political agenda as presented. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
We would have no abstentions then. The motion carries. Item 7.2 is approved as presented. Item 8, future agenda items, none. Item 9, upcoming calendar events. Dr. Moran, do you want to speak to anything at all?
Just a few dates that we're very well aware of, but believe it or not, Labor Day is on September the 6th. We'll have a fall recess and a fall break, September the 7th and October the 18th. Veterans Day is on November 11th, and I think you'll see a concerted effort to really do a lot of neat things around our district around that day, as well as Patriots Day. And then Thanksgiving is November 24th to 26th. I know it's a little hard to think about those dates, but they're going to be right around the corner.
That's true. All right, thank you. Item 10, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one? Abstain? No one. All right, the meeting is adjourned.